when it comes to the internal reaction to Vince McMahon's creative comeback, PW Insider additionally said, among some talents we spoke with, there was a huge negative shift in morale as they realized things were going to go back to exactly where they were before Paul Levesque was placed in control as chief content officer. One source said, the place felt nuked, but others didn't go that far. The feeling was that going forward, the likelihood was that McMahon would be overseeing everything again, leaving the creative once again to his whims and sensibilities, although whether that actually plays out remains to be seen. A big part of that feeling of resignation was that Levesque is genuinely liked and trusted by the talents, especially since so many came through the WWE NXT system, and for some of them, that feeling of security many had felt in the run from SummerSlam to WrestleMania was no longer a given, and would be far departure from how some we spoke to felt tonight. Speaking about what this return to control by Vince McMahon spells for Triple H, who is in charge of creative, Dave Meltzer said on Wrestling Observer Radio, it's what it was. It will be what it was before. If people think it's going to be bad, then it's going to be bad. But that's just what way that it is. The TV show was changed when Vince got there, and it was changing as the show was going on, and that was tonight. And that will be what it is going forward. With Cody Rhodes' last scene getting taken out by Brock Lesnar on Raw, Dave Meltzer mentioned what Vince McMahon's return to power means for the American Nightmare, saying on Wrestling Observer Radio, another thing is that Vince is the one who personally recruited Cody Rhodes, not Triple H. Not that Triple H didn't use him well, he used him great, but Vince was the one who flew to Cody with Bruce Pritchard, and Cody at the time wasn't looking to go. Bruce Pritchard called and asked, are you interested? And Cody said, I might as well hear them out. I'm a free agent. Then Vince flew down to see him, and once Vince flies down to see you, you know, he's got that aura, and he's convincing. Cody still had to go back and forth and everything, but it was Vince who largely was the one who got this deal done. So Cody's not some guy that Vince hates, he's a guy that Vince brought in. Talking about what Vince McMahon's return to power could mean for Kenny Omega potentially signing with WWE, it was noted on Wrestling Observer Radio, for Kenny Omega and people like that, you know, when it comes time for that decision, unless he's making the decision to stay, if he makes that decision to leave, that final decision isn't coming for months anyway. So you know, yeah, of course, it's gonna have an effect. If he looks and sees that he thinks that he won't be happy, then he'll make money either way. So it doesn't matter. It's just what his personal goals are. And I know his personal goals is to have the most fun possible. Despite the purchase of WWE by Endeavor, it looks like the mass layoffs are still Vince McMahon's decision, as the Observer said, to be determined. I can't say for sure. It really depends on the mentality of creative, and that's going to be Vince again. Rather than, I don't see Ari Emanuel saying, hey, Vince, we've got too many guys in developmental. He's going to go, tell me about this developmental. And it's going to be whether Vince says it. If Vince feels that this is the way to go, and we sign 200 guys to get 10 stars out of it, then that's the way they're going to go. If Vince goes, we've got too many guys here, it's not a good idea, then he could do that and a bunch of people in developmental would be let go. That would have been the way before Vince McMahon left, so that'll be a Vince McMahon decision. That's certainly not up to anyone else. With him previously hospitalized and put in the ICU, unfortunately Bushwhacker Butch has passed away, as Bushwhacker Luke announced on Facebook. Late last night, I lost my friend, brother, and tag team partner of over 50 years with the passing of Bob Butch Miller. My heart goes out to his wife Helen, his lovely daughters Sharon and Kirsten, and all of his grandchildren. From the early 1970s, when we were young mates wrestling for John Da Silva in New Zealand, my first impression of Bob the Chest Miller, as he was called in those days, was that he was a first-class redneck. And what bloody redneck he was, but he was also an all-around good guy and a great friend. By the time we reached our mid-20s, we found ourselves traveling the world together, from New Zealand to Australia to Malaysia, Singapore and Japan, before invading the North American territories in Canada and the United States as the Sheep Herders. In 1988, we were in our 40s and still at the top of our game when we got a call from the offices in Connecticut with an offer to join the largest and fastest growing wrestling promotion in the world, the WWF/E. The Bushwhackers were born. As the Bushwhackers, we appeared in the largest venues in the world, in front of the biggest crowds professional wrestling had ever seen, and we were eventually honored by our fans and peers with our inclusion in the WWE Hall of Fame in 2015 and the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame in 2020. We did it all, we saw it all, and we accomplished it all together. This past weekend in Los Angeles, Bob flew in from New Zealand to join me for WrestleMania weekend and the related festivities, neither of us knowing it would be our last days together and his last days of life. If you were to read the story of my life, it would say that I am only child, but it would be wrong. In life, I had a brother and his name was Bob Miller. I love you, Bob. Until I see you again, woo-ah, yeah. Talking about his current deal with AEW, Andrade said this to Lucha Libre Online. I'm with AEW to make it clear. Soon my contract will expire. I had a tear in my chest and I got surgery in November. I was out for 4 months, but soon I'll be back. I was at the Hall of Fame accompanying my wife and to be next to a great friend, Rey Mysterio. He's the symbol for all the Latinos, Rey Mysterio. It seems that during his time away from AEW, Jeff Hardy has undergone surgery, as a fan posted this picture on Twitter writing, "Met Jeff Hardy while vacationing today, could not have been more generous and likable. He just had eye surgery, get well soon." Giving a health update on superstar Billy Graham, who has been in the hospital. His wife revealed this online. "Friends, Billy has had a very rough run lately. He coded, but God decided that it was not his time to go and brought him back to us. He is going on over 3 weeks in the Mayo Hospital ICU, checked into a rehab center, and is now back at the Mayo. He is dealing with a myriad of very serious health issues, a major infection in his ears and skull that may take 6 months, intravenous IVs, congestive heart failure, diabetes, hearing loss as a result of the infection, and the list goes on. He is facing a long period of rehab, and his insurance will only pay a portion of this. He is facing at least 2 months in a skilled nursing facility once he is stabilized and released from the Mayo Hospital. Wayne has lost 45 pounds in the last 3 weeks. Wayne's wife Valerie is doing the best she can to work full time while also doing all she can for her husband. They are facing mounting long-term medical related bills. Any amount would be greatly appreciated." Speaking about when he plans on retiring from pro wrestling commentary, Michael Cole told the Sports Media Podcast, "People ask me all the time, how long are you going to do this for? I'll tell you one thing, 30 years would be a really cool goal. That's 4 years from now. But I can promise you this, I will get out before I slip. I'm not going to be, and no disrespect to anyone else, but I'm not going to be a 75 or 80-year-old man doing this week in and week out. I busted my ass. I made a really good living, and I want to be able to get out while the going is good and still be able to enjoy the rest of my life. I don't want to be a shell of myself. I don't want to be that. Man, that guy used to be good. He's not good anymore. I don't want to be that person." With Fire Vince trending during WWE shows, Ringside News noted that we reached out about the new Fire Vince trend. A tenured source in WWE told us that the new powers that be are aware of the scandal. They're aware of all the criticism of Vince's rewritten scripts and anything else you could think of. It was added that we've heard a lot about Vince McMahon's new arrangement with Endeavor today. The new deal is not done yet, and Endeavor is aware of the controversy and upset fans. That being said, we were told they're not about to address it and ruin their multi-billion-dollar deal. Iconic theme creator for WWE Jim Johnston had apparently contacted AEW about making music for them, as he told Conversations with Conrad. "I actually approached AEW at one point to write some themes for them with no interest. The way I approached, it's very possible that the people in charge never got that memo. I'd be happy to write themes for them. I'd be happy to write themes for WWE, but I would never want to get as immersed as I was. It's almost a frustration for me. The few times I'm going through these cable stations and I land on one of these programs and I'm shaking my head. What does this music have to do with anything? We've gone from a time when you could be cooking in the kitchen and the TV is 2 rooms away and you could tell who was coming out to the ring. Now it's noise to me. How did that transition happen to where it seems to just get done to the pure noisy spectacle of it all? And we've lost that magic of all about character and storyline." Giving details on Brian Cage's status with AEW, it was reported that Brian Cage is technically a free agent, while ROH six-man tag team champion Fightful Select has learned that Brian Cage's agreement to work with AEW/Ring of Honor expired at midnight following ROH Supercard of Honor. Originally, his deal was set to be up before that, but he agreed to work through the show. All Elite Wrestling not only has a long-term contract on the table for Cage, but we're told there were attempts at a short-term extension to discuss a longer-term contract. When Fightful asked Tony Khan after Supercard of Honor, he stated that he wanted Brian Cage to remain with AEW for a long time. We're told that productive conversations have occurred between the two sides, and conversations are ongoing. There have been attempts from ROH/AEW to extend Cage's deal due to injury time, as he was sidelined when they first signed him, but Cage pushed back on that. With the daughter of Eddie and Vicky Guerrero, Sherilyn, accusing her stepfather, Vicky has deleted her response on Instagram. But now Sherilyn's sister Shaul has said this about it. "I am deeply saddened at the state of my family has been in for years. What my sister stated happened on the cruise was true. She did get SA'd by my stepfather. SA is never okay, and she has every right to talk about it. Was it? No, but it was unwanted touching, which is absolutely unacceptable and traumatizing. This incident tore an even deeper wedge into our family than what was there before. My mother and sister have had a deeply tumultuous relationship for years, same with my sister and I. After this incident on the cruise, we all went into various forms of therapy in order to heal. My sister has led the public to believe we abandoned her after the essay, which is not true. The family went into various forms of therapy, and Mom and Chris helped Sherilyn get on her feet again by helping her financially, as they have done for Sherilyn since she was 22. Does this solve the wounds? Absolutely not. But she was not abandoned after this incident. In response to my sister saying, I have left her alone and blocked communication, I don't owe anyone an explanation for the steps I take for my own mental health, but I will defend myself when prompted. My relationship ended with my sister years later after the SA. I had blocked communication after she continued to verbally and emotionally abuse me during arguments, and when I came down to Houston to help her in recovering for a surgery. During that trip, Sherilyn's abuse was so intense, I had to leave her home, which was fine to leave her home alone for an hour, so I could try and gather myself. I tried to drive to a show in San Antonio, but was riddled with panic attacks. My husband flew me home, and I pulled out of shows because that abuse combined with my already unwell state led me to have some serious suicidal ideation. Sherilyn till this day uses that fact that I had to leave our argument as ammunition, saying I abandoned her. Barely understand, let alone the fans that think they know our family. I'm so sad that we are dealing with all of this hurt publicly now. I hope the family that is supporting you will hold your hand and give you the support you need. That family does not include me due to the verbal and emotional abuse you have subjected me to over many years. My boundaries matter just as yours do, and until you agree to meet with a therapist to work this out, then we will continue to heal separately. I hope you find healing." Speaking about it, Vince McMahon will be in Portland for SmackDown tomorrow. Dave Meltzer said this about WWE Creative on Wrestling Observer Radio. Either he's coming to Portland for SmackDown and tearing up the show, or he's, at worst, maybe going to stay in Connecticut and be in the production meeting remote, in which case he'll probably have less tearing up of the show. But he's there, and he's the decision maker, and he's number one. He's number one. That's it. Triple H has gone from being the guy to being basically what Paul Heyman was and what Bruce Pritchard was before, where they're in charge, but everything gets overruled. Talking about the state of modern pro wrestling, Bret Hart said this to HN Live about WWE and AEW. The old kind of wrestling is sorely missed by a lot of people. If the old wrestling was around, like my dad's wrestling, we'd come to see it. I'm trying to advise my son Dallas and help him deliver the kind of wrestling show that I would enjoy watching, where the wrestlers actually know what a headlock is, rather than doing the scripted ballet and leaping, twirling, and dancing around like a bunch of ballet dancers. I don't really enjoy today's wrestling for those reasons. They've lost a lot of steps towards the reality and the credibility of wrestling. Wrestling, in my opinion, needs to pretend to be real. It always has pretended really hard, almost to the point that you believe it is real. Wrestling is so far-fetched today. When I think of WWE and see 20 wrestlers crowded together outside on the floor, and someone dives over the top rope and knocks them all down like bowling pins, I roll my eyes at how pathetic wrestling is today. Top to bottom, all the top wrestlers and all the middle-bottom wrestlers in WWE and AEW all slapping their leg on every punch and slap. It's to the point where I can't watch wrestling today. Sadly, it's getting too phony. I really question the direction that the people that are in charge are taking wrestling. AEW has gone in a bad direction with all the violence and gore. I watched an episode, Dr. Martha Hart doing her big press conference. I'm watching AEW and Jon Moxley is sticking a fork in somebody's head for 5 minutes with a close-up. This isn't wrestling. I would recommend turning all of that off and not watching because it's not very good. Wrestling is going in bad directions because people don't know what wrestling is or was. It's the people in charge that I question, and I'm not sure who is in charge anymore, especially in WWE. You never know who is in charge from one day to the next. It seems to me that somebody is not paying attention to the details. Back in my day, there was Chief, Jay Strongbow, Pat Patterson, Jack Lanza, who knew exactly what needed to be done and knew the orders to carry out from Vince McMahon each night. There was a better understanding. When you came back after a match, Chief Jay would say, "Don't do this anymore, don't do that, change this." It was always the best advice to people who knew what they were talking about. I don't think that's happening today. I think the people talking to the young wrestlers have absolutely zero idea of how wrestling is. They're all guys who never made it in wrestling, and none of them ever had any ideas. I don't know who is doing the thinking anymore, but someone needs to fire everybody that's in charge in both companies, in all companies. They lack credibility, they are not believable, and the 1980s wrestling was 100 times better than the wrestling today. The best professional wrestling needs to pretend to be real. When it stops pretending to be real, which is all of what they're doing today, it's ridiculous. Speaking about an issue with AEW's roster, commentator for the company Jim Ross said this on his podcast. An argument might be made in AEW that we have too many talents. We got a lot of talent. You don't want to start cutting the roster because that's not my job. I could certainly handle it if it were. But we have a lot of people coming through. Tony Khan is always looking to give guys opportunities. You never know what you'll find. On Busted Open Radio, Saraya recalled her debut promo for AEW as she mentioned the shots she took at WWE. "I was so mortified by the promo myself that I actually second-guessed coming back altogether. Did I just make a mistake? Did I make myself look so awful?" People like Dean Malenko was like, "You went out there, you said on the microphone that you were nervous." I really was. I was terrified. I have never been so terrified in my career. Even when I debuted, won different championships, I was terrified, but not as terrified as coming back after 5 years, going to a different company in front of a new group of fans, in front of all of these people watching you, and they want to see you fail or do good. There was a lot of eyes. The one thing I do wish I didn't say, I got asked to say a certain sentence, the sentence where I was like, finally, a boss that listens to me. I wish I didn't take that low-hanging fruit. I've always spoke highly of WWE because they helped me a lot. I love AEW. There is no reason to take that low-hanging fruit, and I feel that caused a lot of tribalism and negative reaction. There are some things you wish you didn't say, and that's one of them. I feel it would have gone smoother if I wouldn't have said that. I understand why people were mad, but I'm playing a character. Be quiet. Touching on what he could be doing in pro wrestling if he is forced to retire from in-ring action, Big E told Pop Culture, "Being able to go to these college campuses and talk to athletes and let them know about WWE and the opportunities here really resonates with me, because I remember being 23 years old and a failed football player at Iowa dealing with a bunch of injuries and then trying to figure out my entire life. I really love being involved in that way, and I'm sure there will be other ways as well that I can be involved while I'm not in the ring." Touching on Logan Paul's status with WWE following WrestleMania, the Wrestling Observer newsletter pointed out that Logan Paul, when talking about his contract expiring after WrestleMania, did say he expects to sign a new deal, and during the week, the talk was that he did sign a new deal. Talking about a potential boxing matchup against former UFC fighter Nate Diaz, Paul told BT Sport, "I think he's running. This guy, I think he's ducking. We have the sweetest deal for him, and he knows the type of numbers I bring in. I'm not a $250,000 pay-per-view buys type of fighter. You're going to get $750,000 250,000, a million buys, and I'm an 0-1 YouTuber. Seems like an easy fight on paper. I don't even care anymore. I thought I had something locked in, but apparently he said the fight was off. Like, why? Why? So he could fight someone else? For what purpose? To get less buys and maybe an easier fight? I don't get it. As far as I know, it's not dead because we had to offer him more money. It's like we're baiting this guy into fighting me. It's hard for me to get a fight because either you're not worth my time and energy or you're not going to sell pay-per-views. I'll do it, but I need a dance partner, and I don't need a tune-up fight. Give me the real dogs. Nate Diaz is a dog. I was looking forward to that fight. Then I got a call the other day and they said they didn't want to do it. It was almost done. I don't know. On his To Be The Man podcast, Ric Flair said this about the WWE and UFC merger. I just personally hope that the McMahon family, he is still allowed to run the WWE, because God forbid we have another situation where Turner buys the NWA. That turned into the worst case scenario ever. It all depends on whose ego, who's doing what. But if they don't keep Vince involved and let him help make creative decisions, I don't think they'll be as successful as they would be with him. People say they're upset with Vince. I don't see anybody upset with him. There's always going to be people that are complaining about their position in the company because they're not where they want to be or they think they should be, but that's not the fault of Hunter or Vince. Some people have a pretty high opinion of themselves that they should keep to themselves rather than complain publicly, in my opinion. Giving his thoughts on Cody Rhodes coming up short against Roman Reigns at WrestleMania, Matt Hardy came to the conclusion that AEW was to blame, saying on his Extreme Life podcast, Cody, he ends up leaving, he goes out, he creates a company, he creates success, he gets himself over. He's a big deal and people are all behind him. Vince comes in at the end of the day like, hold up, before you were going to run this ship, I'm going to show you, I'll make you earn it. I mean, that's a possibility. I don't know if that is the actual, factual, true deal though. After WWE's recent merger plan with UFC was announced, McMahon stated he'd only be participating in creative at the higher level and not in the weeds as he'd done previously. McMahon's presence became glaring on this week's Raw as multiple late script revisions were ordered by the chairman himself. With speculation regarding Bayley's status in WWE after being pulled from Raw, No DQ wrote that, according to a report on PWInsiderElite.com, there is no expectation of Bayley leaving WWE. The belief is that Bayley's sometimes the most romantic love story comes to an end tweet is a case of her building buzz, and not a sign that she's unhappy or that her creative is being dropped. Dave Meltzer of F4W Online did note that while not official, there was a belief damage control was being broken up, and a tweet from Bayley indicated that. On Friday, Bayley published photos from WrestleMania 39 weekend with the caption, "Are you doing this work to facilitate growth or to become famous? Which is more important?" When it comes to plans for a WWE draft, Sean Ross Sapp reported that the WWE draft was set to happen late last year, but then got moved. A draft that would have effectively reset the rosters for the new Triple H regime was rumored late last year. However, talent were told that it was being moved to an undetermined time in 2023. However, Fightful Select can confirm that unanimously across over a dozen talent on the WWE roster have not been told that a WWE draft is coming or when it could even be. In the past, sources at both Fox and USA Network had told Fightful that they primarily prefer distinctly different and separate rosters in order to specialize their investment. However, since the Triple H regime took shape, we've heard much less of that. With Drew McIntyre's WWE contract coming up, it seems there could be issues with re-signing the star. As Wade Keller of PW Torch noted, we alluded to this, that there's been talk that he is unhappy with his current situation in WWE, and I'm hearing it's kind of a mix of creative and money and what kind of offer he's getting for a renewal. It sounds like WWE is taking seriously the possibility that he is going to let his deal run out rather than agree to something that he believes is less than he deserves or less than what he thinks he has coming. There's a chance that he was pulled from SmackDown in part because he is just really physically beat up from that match, and so not just having to travel and him getting a day off was sort of given to him either at his request or the medical team in WWE just said, yeah, with what he's been through, he should have some time off. And this was your pro wrestling news update. I hope you're all having a great day. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see y'all later.